Good morning and welcome to Writers Chat. We are so glad you're here. I'm Norma Poor and I'm joined by my co host, Brandy Bro. Excuse me. And we have a great episode for you this morning. Thank you for being here live. And if you're watching the recording, please press the subscribe button down there and subscribe to our channel. If you would like to be here live, we're here on almost every Tuesday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern. And we would love to have you join our community live. Today, as I said, we have a great guest who's has a wonderful presentation chat. Since we're writers chat, we have a good chat lined up for today. And without any further explaining, I want to turn it over to Brandy to introduce our guest. Thank you.
All right. So, have you eliminated all telling? Are your characters complex? Is every scene necessary? Most authors will answer yes to these questions, but then editors and readers tell them the descriptions don't engage them. The characters are stereotyped and the story dragged. How do you fix it? By training our writer's brain to read with an editor's eye and by recruiting some outside help. That's how. In this workshop, we'll look at common mistakes novelists make and then learn how to sharpen your self-editing skills. And to do that is our guest. Owner of Right Now Editing, Karin Beery is a multi-award-winning author and editor with experience in traditional and self-publishing, freelance editing, and editing for publishers. She is an active member of Advanced Writers and Speakers Association, Christian Authors Network, and Christian Editors Association. When she's not editing or teaching, she writes hopeful fiction with a healthy dose of romance. Online, you will find her at karinbeery.com, and that is KarinBeery.com. Karin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me here. So, thought I'd tell you a little bit about the heart of this presentation and where it came from. And actually, you probably can't see this because my screen blurred, and this doesn't come in all the time. I don't know if there we go.
You go.
I have a very limited scope of interests. I write fiction and I edit fiction. And the only nonfiction book I've ever written is How to Edit Your Novel. But this book was birthed out of a desire to help writers because it started with my own journey. Years ago now, almost 10 years ago, 20 years ago now, almost 20 years ago, I wrote my first novel and needed an edit. And I knew I needed an edit, but I didn't know anything about the editing process. I didn't know anything about editors. The short version of the story is that I wasted all my money on the wrong editor. And then I was stuck with a manuscript that needed work, and I didn't know what to do with it. So I started investing in editing classes and learned how to edit my own manuscript. Found out that I actually love editing. And in my point of view, I think I'm actually a much better editor than I am a writer. But I wanted to help other authors. Partially, a little bit of selfishly, I want to read better books. So I want to help them write better books. But I understand too, for my own situation, editing is expensive. It's also time consuming. Sometimes, you're ready for an edit and you can't find an editor for 3, 4, 5 months because they're booked so far out in advance. So I wanted to help more people, but how do you do that without charging them a ton? And also, I can't work for $5 an hour. That's just not realistic. So it started by teaching other editors how to edit fiction. Because just because someone can edit a nonfiction book does not mean they can edit a novel. That was the mistake that I made actually, is I knew an editor and I really wanted to work with her, and I did not understand that a nonfiction editor really shouldn't be editing fiction. There's just too much to understand. So I wanted to help people be able to edit their own works. it requires a lot of time and a lot of understanding. So I needed to take my years of experience and condense it. And it started with teaching other editors how to edit their manuscripts, but it turned into how can I help more authors? Because even though I'm helping editors learn how to edit fiction, they still have to be hired. Authors still have to find them, still have to pay them. It's not really solving the problem. And what I did is I took everything that I wished I had understood when I first started writing, because I really thought I was doing everything. And I knew you're supposed to show, you're not supposed to tell. But aren't I doing that? I know that. I thought I was doing it. I thought I was engaging the senses. I thought my characters were great. So how do you fix that? And how do you do it on a budget? Um, I actually do have some slides that I will go ahead and pull up. You guys should all be able to see how to approach your edits.
Yep.
All right. It starts with a big picture. And this is gonna be a crash course because this course is actually something that I can teach in, I can make this as long as I want. I've been editing for over 15 years now. I love this topic. I could talk about it for hours. Um, the biggest mistake that I see people make is, first of all, thinking that they can do it themselves. Absolutely going to tell you right now, you cannot do it yourself. You can do the majority of work yourself. You're going to have to do the majority of the work yourself. But what I'm really going to teach you right now is how to identify the things that you're doing wrong. But more importantly than that, how do you get help from other people? How do you engage beta readers or advanced reader or even your writing group? How do you get the information from them that you need so that you can go through your manuscript and make it better? I absolutely recommend, at the very least, at least 3 other people look at your manuscript, because then there's a tiebreaker. So if you have one person say chapter 1 was boring, another person say they loved chapter 1, who's right? So you get that third person in there that says, yeah, it was a pretty good chapter 1. I liked it. Okay, so maybe that first reader, it just wasn't their jam. You can look at it, see what can be tweaked, but you want to have a majority. So go for an odd number. Once you start getting more than 5 people, then there's just a whole lot of cooks in the kitchen, and it really can be more confusing than helpful. But when you approach your edit, don't worry. Especially, this is self-editing, how to make your novel better, how to look at showing and characterization. This is the big picture. This is first step. You're not going to worry about proofreading. So in order of the types of edits that you would do if you're hiring an editor, if you're working with a publisher, if you're doing it yourself, the first one that we're really going to be working on and talking about is that big picture substantive edit. That's the plot, the pacing, the characterization, all of those things that have to fit first. They have to be working first before anybody's going to read your book or agents or publishers are going to look at it. If you haven't figured those things out yet, nobody cares. We're not going to worry so much about the mechanics, the copy edit, or the proofread, because so much of what you're writing is going to change that if you spend so much time worrying about the commas and worrying about whether or not there is used correctly, you're going to waste time doing that because you're going to end up cutting it and changing it later. So we're not going to worry about that. The line edit is going to kind of tie in there a little bit. That line edit is really making sure you've got all the right words. It's a little nitpickier, and we'll get to that kind of towards the end. But before anything, before you even look at your manuscript, I cannot stress this enough. You need to know your market and you need to know your genre. I have a lot of friends that are publishers and agents. And hands down, the number one reason they reject people is because they get a manuscript, they get a submission, a query, and it's not the right genre. Authors literally don't know what genres they're writing. They want to write a romance because they know that romance is the number one best-selling genre. So they just call the book romance because in one scene a character kisses someone. That's not a romance. You have to know what your genre is, but you also need to know your market. Right now, the two main markets are the Christian and what I call the general market. I don't like to call it secular, I just call it the general market. Um, the standards are set by the CRA, the Christian Retailers Association, or the ABA, the American Booksellers Association. And really, what you're looking for there is the content and the language. I know that a lot of Christians want to write a book that's sharing the gospel truth, sharing the truth of Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, and they're trying to pitch it to the general market. Literally 1 out of 20 million books with that plot line will make it in the general market. They're just not interested. And I know there's a lot of Christian writers that want to write the truth of the fact that there's people that are drinking and swearing and having sex and all this stuff, and they become Christians. So they want to make it real, and they're going to describe all of that on their page and then pitch it to the Christian market. It's not going to sell. You need to understand what their expectations are for content and language, because if you don't, you are immediately shooting yourself in the foot by either pitching to people who are going to reject it, or you're going to publish books that are going to be completely destroyed by readers, and you're going to get terrible reviews because you're not meeting market expectations. And then with the genre, know the expectations of the genre. You need to know how long they need to be, expected point of views, what the necessary plot points are, especially within romance. There are certain beats that you need to meet within the story to make it a true romance. Now, there's a lot of romantic stories out there, which is going to be fiction with a romantic thread, or romantic women's fiction, where the romance isn't the key point, but it's in there. But it's so important that you understand all of the different expectations. And there's a lot of them. So there are main categories of genre: the contemporary, the historical, speculative, romance, but there's also the subcategories. The subcategories, these are ones where your story has to meet the expectations of both genres that you're listing. So if you're going to call it romantic suspense, it has to meet the criteria for a romance novel, and it has to meet the criteria for a suspense novel. If it doesn't, it's suspense with some romance in it, which is fine. There are a lot of people out there who are looking for books without romance in them. But if you're going to call it a historical romance, you need to meet all of the historical expectations for your readers and all of the romance expectations for your readers. This, and literally this is another class that I teach. So I won't go into it here, but make sure you understand what you're writing. Because if you tell your readers, whether it's an agent or you're self-publishing, that this is a historical romance and it takes place in 1990, you're going to have a lot of very irritated readers, or you're going to get a lot of rejections. You need to know what's expected. On the flip side of that, what I often see is, well, I have written a contemporary dark romance space opera with historical threads, and they just put 6 or 7 different genres in there, thinking, oh, well, the book that I've written is going to appeal to historical readers, romance readers, space opera readers, steampunk readers. No, it doesn't work. It doesn't multiply. It actually shrinks your audience, because you have to find the readers who read all of those genres. That is very difficult. If this is one of your first few manuscripts, I highly recommend you pick one of the main categories or one of the subcategories and stick with that before starting to blend genres, because you really need to master all of them before you start bringing them together. And bringing more together does not mean you're going to expand your audience. It actually means you're going to shrink it. So my philosophy when it comes to editing is always to work smarter, not harder. I do this with my authors, and this is how I teach self-editing. You want to work with what you already have. So if, for example, you started a story and who you think the main character is really isn't the main character, it's another character, my recommendation is always going to be don't try to force the original main character story. Just jump ship and jump into the other character's ship. Let's make her the main character instead. Work with what you've already got. So I'm going to walk you through evaluating your manuscript and how you can strengthen what you have and clean it up as best you can without doing more work than absolutely necessary. I'm not going to call you lazy. We're not lazy. We're just smarter. So these are the self-editing aids. And as I mentioned before, beta readers, your early readers, whatever you want to call it. This is key, and this is really the key that I think is learning how to ask those readers to give you information that you can use. That's later on in the. I always want to jump to it right away because it's kind of the heart of it, but we'll wait. But these are some tips that I've learned from people that really do work when you are doing your own editing. Read it out loud. You hear things and your tongue will trip over things once you read it out loud, because if you're just reading it on your computer screen, your mind will tell you what it thinks should be there and not what's really there. You can also use software that will read it to you. It'll help you hear what's actually on the page and not what you think is on the page. So this is one I haven't tried yet. I'm very excited to, because I'm going to be working on a manuscript that I've had for a long time. I need to get some fresh eyes on it using a different font. It does something mentally and you see the story differently. So if you're going to work on your screen, just switch it to a different font, use a different font size. One thing I have done before is I've gotten rid of double spacing and gone to single spacing. Well, it just does something and it helps you see the story differently. My personal preference is to print it out. There is something about getting away from the computer and seeing your words in print that really shift the way your brain looks at it, because no longer you're looking at this baby that you've written on the computer. Now you're looking at a story. And for some reason, you can really engage with it differently. I'm a big fan of that. But again, we're really going to talk about how you can maximize your beta readers. I'm watching the time there. You're going to start? The first thing you're going to start with is your point of view. We're going to talk about the foundation and some different fiction techniques. You really want to hit the point of view character first, because that's going to change if you have to change the point of view character, or if you change the story to make sure it fits with the point of view character. We want to make sure that's hammered in first. So that's where we're going to start. And I'm already talking too much. I love this topic, you guys. If you're just starting out, if you haven't built your audience yet, the smartest POV to use is the third person. For some reason, I've never heard someone say, I won't read a third person point of view book. There are people who will not read first person point of view books. Especially, I'm seeing this now, a lot of younger readers, they can't separate themselves from the fiction. And if they can't imagine themselves doing it, then when they're seeing I, they put themselves in the place of the character and like, well, I would never do that. So they put the book down. I can't explain it. I don't know why. But if you're trying to build that audience, if you're trying to get that contract, writing a third person story is going to increase your chances of connecting with the reader. So these are the type of questions. Your manuscript is done. You want to know, am I making the most of this? You've sent your manuscript off to your beta readers. These are the questions that you're going to ask them because you want to know, am I using the right point of view? Am I using point of view well? And I am very happy. Please don't feel like you need to write all of this down. I will send the slides to Writers Chat so that they can email them to you. Um, so yeah, please don't feel like you need to copy this all down right now. Just listen. We'll get through this. But the questions to ask, and you'll notice all of these questions are two parts. Does the point of view flow well? People will say yes or no. That's not going to help you at all. If not, where did it lose you? You want to ask follow-up questions of your readers so that you know specifically, and you can tweak these questions and say which chapters or which scenes. So then you know specifically there's something wrong in this area. Or they might just say, the hero, I didn't get the hero's point of view at all. So then you know there's something wrong with the hero. Let's go reevaluate that. Does it feel natural? Where are the places, were there any places where the point of view confused you? And that could be something as simple as dialogue tags, but you always want to ask your readers where the issues happened so that you can go back and take a peek at it. I just generally ask for scenes or chapters. I don't ask them like to highlight anything. Again, I want to make it as easy for them as possible. I'm the author. I've got to do the hard work. But asking them to give me some clues as to what's going on is going to help you know where to focus. And it could be you have the wrong point of view character. It could be that you have a weak character that you have to work on yet. Could just maybe be some bad transitions. But just ask the questions, and then you can use that information to go back and figure out what needs to be changed. The foundation is the plot and characters, because without the plot and characters, you don't have a story. You have to have both of those. So these are the types of questions that I would ask. Are there places where the story dragged or it was over-explained? Did the action ever drag? Were you bored? Did you skim or skip any parts? Were there any scenes you didn't care about? And what did you like or dislike about the ending? I don't ever ask them, did you like the ending? Because then, again, yes, no answer. And don't ask them, did you like the end? Or, what did you like about it? Give them that option to say, I disliked something about it. Make sure that they know they can give you what would be considered negative feedback, because in this phase, it's not really negative. It's all helpful, but they might not feel like they can tell you something that feels negative. So make sure when you give them these questions, you make it clear they can give you whatever feedback they have. You just need as much feedback as you can get. Now, based on the responses you get, this is where you really have to put that editor hat on and figure out, okay, so what are the issues? If they're, skimming, if there is, if it's saggy or boring, so these are some problems that I see, and this is some of the things that people might say. So if the plot just kind of feels rushed and they're confused about it, it might be because your act one doesn't exist. I see this a lot. A lot of authors are skipping the introduction and just jumping into act two, jumping into the body of the story, which leads to confusion. So if people are confused in the first few chapters, maybe your opening act doesn't exist yet. Or maybe there's no explicit goals or motivations. So if you're getting feedback about the beginning of the book, check those things. So how do you fix that? The first is what we call establishing normal. And now this is not explaining every single detail. I think probably one of the best examples of establishing normal is watching the first episode of the Gilmore Girls. That first opening scene. They don't tell you Lorelai Gilmore is a coffee addict who likes to harass the cafe owner, And they just show you Lorelai at the counter saying, "Please, please, 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 please. How many cups have you had today? Haven't had any. How many cups have you had today? 4." Right there. That's normal. It's their normal banter. You know right away what their relationship is, what the issue is. You need to establish normal. And you need to introduce at least the main character. Again, this depends on what genre you're writing, what the genre expectations are. But you need to introduce the main characters and establish normal. That will help those Act 1 problems. Act 2, if it's saggy or boring, if that's where people are skipping, then the stakes might not be clear, or they might not be very important stakes. You need to raise those. Adding conflict and tension. This is something I see in all genres. I see it in lots of new authors, mid-level authors. There's just not enough conflict or tension. And yes, those are two different things. Again, that's another class. But if people are skipping, then you need to do something to raise the stakes, make it clear what the characters are going to lose, or make it so that there's more to lose. Add that conflict and add that tension, and that will keep the readers reading, and that will get rid of the boring. And then if they're commenting on the last part of the book, Act 3, if it's unsatisfying or there's too many endings. This is one that not many people talk about, because we all know you need to have a satisfying ending. It doesn't have to be happily ever after. It just has to fit the genre, and it has to fit the expectations. But sometimes there are too many endings. In a romance, you might get the happily ever after. They profess their love to each other. Oh, but then there's another chapter. And maybe they decide they're going to open a business together. Oh, but then there's another chapter. Well, no, actually, the happily ever after, the declaration of love, that's kind of the ending. And when you drag it on, it leaves the reader kind of, it's not satisfying anymore. Your goal is just always that satisfying ending. Again, know your genre, know what that means, know what the expectations are so that you can meet that. When it comes to plot structure, because I know there are some people, well, I don't really like the 3-act structure, or I do the 4-act structure. It doesn't matter if you do the 4-act, how many acts you want to do. The thing with the plot structure, the reason it's so important, I like to think of it as the grocery store. Most grocery stores have a pretty similar layout. You walk in and the produce is either to your left or your right. And there's usually a bakery or a deli to your left or your right. But around the perimeter of the store, that's where you get all of the refrigerated items. You get all of the meats and the dairy and everything. And in those center aisles, that's where you're going to have your canned goods and your pet supplies and your baby supplies. Now imagine you go into your grocery store and all of a sudden the first thing you see is the pet food. And then for some reason, the produce is in aisle 3 in one section. You got fruits, but the vegetables are in aisle 12 in a middle section. And it has all of the elements that you want from a grocery store. And you might barrel through it to get what you need. But are you going to go back there? Because it's confusing and it takes a lot of thought and a lot of effort to figure out what you need. That's what plot structure is. It's not always exactly the same, but there's a general format. There's just a basic expectation. There'll be some different tweaks. Like I said, might be to the left, might be to the right, might be to the back, but there's just an unconscious expectation. You don't want to throw your readers off too much. If you throw them off too much, they're going to abandon ship and they're going to go back to the grocery store where they know where everything is and they know what to expect, and they're not going to be surprised. Once you've tackled plot, it's character. There's a whole lot of character questions here. We won't go through all of those. But it doesn't matter how good your plot is. If you don't have characters that engage your reader, they're not going to care. And they don't all have to be likable. You can have villains. You can have characters that people don't like at the beginning, but they have a transformation toward the end. There are so many different things that you can do, especially based on the story itself or the genre. But you want to make sure, again, you're always leaving your readers an out. So I don't ever ask them, did you like my main character? Because then you have to tell them who the main character is. And what if the main character, they don't like the main character? Or what if you think the main character is Bob, but it's actually Jean? So instead, who was your favorite character? Who was your least favorite character? Why did you like these characters? What didn't you like? Was there anybody you didn't care about? Because if you find out that they did not care about your hero, you've got a problem. So make sure you're asking them these questions where you're not influencing their answers. You're not telling them what to expect. You're just asking for feedback, and you're giving them the opportunity to give you negative feedback. You definitely want to know who the least favorite character is, because you need to make sure it's not your hero. If nobody likes your hero, there's a problem. So I can send you these slides or screenshot it. So here are some of the main problems that I've seen in my own writing, or I see in other people's writings, and some ways to fix it. Big problems are that you have unrelatable characters, they're unbelievable, they're flat or stereotypical, or they're inconsistent. The solution to most of these issues, number one, is character backstory. If you have an inconsistent character or an unbelievable character, you might not have a strong enough backstory. Now, that does not mean you're putting their backstory in the book. You're going to have a great backstory for your characters, and maybe 10% of it's ever going to get into your book. But you need to know what type of person your character is, so they're consistent throughout the story. You can't have a hero who's tough and strong for 25% of the book, and then he cries for 25% of the book, and then he's tough and strong again, and then he's a weeping hero again at the end. Well, maybe his grandma dies, and grandma's his best friend, and grandma raised him. There's a legit reason. But if he's back and forth with emotions, and he gets angry at one person for saying something in chapter 1, and someone else says the same thing in chapter 10, and he doesn't even flinch, inconsistent. Make sure you know your characters, you know their backstories, so that you can make them consistent throughout the book. Goals, motivations, and conflicts. This is one of the biggest ones that really helps your readers connect to your character. Your readers need to understand what your characters want to achieve, why they want to achieve them, and then you need to make it difficult for them to achieve those goals. There are lots of different types of goals and motivations that your characters can have. I like to recommend that each character starts with at least 2 at the beginning of a book. And throughout the story, some of their goals they're going to meet. And then you got to give them another one. And sometimes they'll have one goal that they never meet throughout the entire book. They might have one goal and the motivation changes. These all need to be evolving throughout the story, and you need to be layering multiple goals and motivations on top of each other. But I recommend starting with at least 2 each for your main characters. That adds depth to your characters, and it gives the reader something to relate to. They might not relate to one goal, but they might relate to the other. They might not believe one goal, but they believe the other. So adding this layer of personality is going to engage readers. So your types of goals that you can start with are external and internal. An internal goal is that whole, I'm trying to mature as a Christian, or I'm trying to be less angry. Everyone in my family's angry. I don't want to be angry. That's an internal goal. An external goal is I want to lose weight. I want to bulk up. I want to get a different job. I want to get my college degree. Anything that's happening outside of the body. Those are 2 great goals to start with. You can also do short-term and long-term. Short-term is, I need to finish reading this book for book club, and there's 14 things getting in my way. Long-term is I have to finish writing this book, and that's going to take me months or years. So make sure they have, and those are things too. And the short-term goal, again, that might wrap up in 2 chapters, but then you're going to have another short-term goal, because I've got a to-do list every day. That's my short-term goal. Just get through my to-do list. Long one, I'm in revision process in one of my novels. Different goals, and again, layers. Everybody can relate to that. Personal and professional. Those are some as well. Those are very similar to internal and external, but a personal goal could be, I need friends. I want to go out and meet some people. I'm new in town. I need to connect with people. And the professional goal is I need a raise, so I need a promotion. Or I need to get out of this job. I need something with more flexibility. Doesn't matter which set you pick. Start with two, and that will help build the relatability, the believability, and help hopefully too with that flat and stereotypical. You don't just want the cheerleader, beautiful blonde girl, uh, gets straight A's and is dating the hunky guy. Maybe her goal is that she wants to put on some weight because she's actually malnourished. Let it be unexpected. Get that stereotype out of there. And then the character arc. If a character is, your readers aren't relating to character, especially throughout the entire story, if there's issues throughout the book, it could be the character arc. I don't actually like to call it an arc because, I guess in my mind, I can see because you're starting your character in a place of normal, and by the end of the book, they have a new normal. So maybe, but I like to see the character arc. I envision it more as like the graph of the Dow Jones. If you've ever seen that from when it started, it starts here and it keeps going up and up and up, and it goes up and down. It has peaks and valleys, but the character is changing throughout the book. And that is really what impacts the GMCs or changes the GMCs. The GMCs are going to change the character arc. Those two work together. But if your character is flatlining, there's no growth. You can do that with some of those little minor characters. They're just there to, serve. You need a waitress, you need a mechanic. They're there for that. But if your main character is not changing, you're missing something, and that's really going to disconnect the readers. Once you have those nailed down, this is the fiction writing techniques. This is that showing versus telling. This is the pacing. These are those issues that we've all taken classes on. We think we're doing them. We know in theory what they mean, but for some reason they're not appearing in our manuscripts. We need to fix that. So these are the questions that you're going to ask so that you can go through and figure out, am I really showing what needs to be shown? Is anything choppy or confusing? Were there any confusing places or descriptions? I am one of those people, I struggle with setting. I don't visualize much of it. I'm way more into the characters, so I always need help with setting. I make sure that's in there. Did anything feel cliche or done before? Cliches are not just phrases, flat as a pancake, that get used. Cliches are those characters that you see in every single romance book. A cliche is a situation that you've read in every single suspense novel. So if you have a beta reader who's familiar with your genre, definitely ask this question because they're going to be able to tell you, I've read that in the last 6 novels that I've read. Something to tweak. What was predictable? Now, again, romance novel, the ending is always predictable. We know that it's going to be happily ever after or happily for now. That's not what we're concerned about. What we're concerned about is this last scene exactly the same as the last scene in 14 other romance novels? That's the predictable part. Any place where you wanted more or any, and this is the tricky one. Don't ever ask, were there words that I used too often? Because as soon as you ask that, they're going to say, well, you used the 14,926 times. Well, of course I did. I have to use the. Or you used your character's name a lot. Well, yeah, I need to. But we all have pet words and phrases. My characters are incredibly grabby. They grab each other in hugs. They grab their keys. They grab that. So I am always on the lookout for the word grab. But as soon as I say, did the word grab stand out to you? Of course it's going to, because that's all they're going to be looking for. So just ask them, because it might just be one word. You might have, this happened years ago. One author, every character it was something random like ecumenical. Everybody refers to everything as ecumenical. That is a very specific word, and to have more than one character use it repeatedly might only appear in the manuscript 4 times. Now, that's not a lot of times, but it stands out because everybody's saying it. It's just kind of odd. So it's how you ask the questions that gives you that valuable feedback that you can use when you're going through your manuscript again. So what to look for? And I've got some more slides of this. So we're going to look at telling. There's 2 different types of telling. I call it big telling and little telling. The overused words, dialogue, and then some hooks and other issues. So the telling. This is, again, you've gotten the feedback that there are some places where it's dragging. There's either over explanation, not enough explanation. So you're looking for telling. Big telling, easy to find, lots of long paragraphs. Where I see this a lot is the beginning of chapters or beginning of scenes. And what they do is you have a chapter, and every chapter starts with 5 paragraphs, either reflecting on what just happened or describing something that happened off the page that the reader doesn't see. So every chapter is starting with 5 paragraphs of information. Just look for that. Look for pages, any place in your manuscript where there's not a lot of white space, where there's not a lot of dialogue, or if you see dialogue and then there's a long paragraph, and then there's 1 sentence of dialogue, and then there's a long paragraph. Those are places where you're probably telling with backstory and info dumps. Little telling is the times where instead of saying she had long, straight brown hair that hung to her back, middle of her back, blue eyes like cornflower, pink lips. But instead of that, you say she was beautiful. She was beautiful is telling. Instead, you want to describe it. You want to show. This is much easier to look for because you can search your manuscript for what I call the telling words. Anytime you name a sense, you're telling. She looked beautiful. Describe what she looked like, and then let the reader interpret, because your wording, if you're going to describe the hair as luscious auburn locks or stringy brown hair, you don't have to tell the reader whether or not your point of view character liked the person's hair. Your description will show them. So you're going to look for those telling words. If someone saw, watched, or looked at, if they felt something, if they heard, or if something sounded. This is time consuming, but you're going to search your manuscript for the word saw. And you're going to see, how am I using that? Now, there are times when telling works because you just want to get through a scene quickly. There's not a whole lot to show, but you're just going to have to do it piece by piece. You're looking for every time you've used that word to make sure that you are actually showing instead of telling what something sounded like. The same thing with emotions. You're looking for happy, sad, excited. Don't tell me she was excited to get the news. Tell me she punched her fist in the air, jumped over the couch, and ran screaming into the streets. Then I'm going to know she was excited. So again, search for those emotion words. Just use your word search find in your Google Doc or your Word document. See how you're using it, and then you can fix those little telling. The other one, these are really sneaky, is wondered, thought, knew, seemed. So you don't need to say, she wondered if he was going to arrive on time. You can just say, Just write in your story, is he going to show up on time? It's clear that she's thinking that because you wrote it on the page. So you don't need to say she thought, is he going to arrive on time? So those are those little ones that you see them in a lot of books. They slip through. But when you start cutting those out, it just tightens the writing. This is when I was talking about those line edits where it's a little nitpickier, but taking those out just pulls the reader even deeper into your point of view character. So they're really experiencing the story with them, and you're making your writing stronger. So you're going to start first looking for the big telling, the backstory and the info dumps. And then you're going to focus more on the little telling with the senses and the emotions and, those others. How am I doing? I got like 10, 12 minutes left. Okay, good. So I got 4 slides left. I'm going. Overused words. Okay, I do not even need to read a manuscript. If this is your first, second, or third manuscript, I can tell you without even reading it that you have overused smiled, nodded, and sighed. I've seen it. I have read so many manuscripts. Search your document for them. Search and see how many times does smile, smiled, and smiling appear in my manuscript. You will be shocked. Because you'll realize you have someone smiling, the same person smiling on one page 4 times. But you miss it. You're envisioning it and you forget, oh, well, I had him smile at the top of the page. The assumption is until you show them stop smiling, they're still smiling. So you don't have to keep reminding the readers. Another one is main character names. When you talk to people, how many times do you actually ever say anybody's name in conversation? And yet, book dialogue, oh my gosh, especially if there's 2 people in a conversation, they will address each other by their formal first names repeatedly. I cannot tell you the last time I even said my husband's name. I call him honey. That's it. So I would never actually, he thinks it's weird if I call him Matt. He's like, what's wrong? Why are you talking to me like that? But we put him in our stories all the time. So search for your main characters' names and see how many times they're appearing. If you've got a main character's name that's appearing on an average of 5 to 10 times per page, you are probably overusing their name. Dialogue. We just talked about names. Make sure use names if there's more than 2 people in a conversation. If there's 2 people in a conversation, you should never see them saying each other's name unless it's for emphasis. If it's an argument or an exclamation, if it's emphatic, go for it. Watch the tags and beats. Tags and beats, they provide clarity or they show something that advances the story. You do not add tags and beats to every line of dialogue. It slows the story. It becomes monotonous. And often what you do is you just add details for the sake of adding details. If there are 2 characters in a conversation, then there should be times where you don't have a tag or beat for 4 or 5 lines of dialogue. We know when you start a new paragraph, then a new speaker is speaking. We don't need you to tell us that it's the other person. We know. Mini info dumps. I have been seeing this a lot. You get 1 line of dialogue followed by 3 or 4 sentences of thought. 1 line of dialogue followed by 3 or 4 sentences of thought. And that looks like, as we mentioned before, with the big telling, the info dumps, is a conversation. Instead of being quick and snappy, it's paragraph after paragraph after paragraph, and really only 4 or 5 things are being said. Look for those mini info dumps. Occasionally they will add to the story, but if they're stopping the action, cut it out and see where you can add it later. Okay, got 2 more slides. Hooks and other issues, just because I didn't know where else to put this, so we're just adding it in here. Your book needs a hook at the beginning, but your chapters need them at the beginning and at the end. You want to make sure you're enticing your readers to keep going. Don't end all your chapters the same. had one client who ended every chapter with a question. Would he make it? Will she get there in time? What will they do now? If your reader can predict how your chapters are going to start or end, it's predictable. You don't want that. Sometimes they're going to start with dialogue. Sometimes they're going to start with action. Sometimes they will start with 2 paragraphs of reflection, but it shouldn't be every chapter. Transitions. There are transitions in thought and transitions in action. If you've ever read a book where you're just confused because your character is thinking about something and all of a sudden they're thinking about something else. Well, how did they get from this topic to the other? Make sure it's clear to your reader. And that's where asking your beta readers was something confusing. They'll tell you. Another big one is action. You don't want to describe every single thing your characters do, but you can't go from the bedroom to the car unless there's a scene break without saying something like she grabbed her purse and ran outside. There has to be something there to show the reader what's going on. And again, if you get comments on things being confusing, check for that. The last one we're going to talk about is the unnecessary actions. That's the step-by-step instructions. She can grab her purse and go outside. She doesn't need to check her reflection in the mirror, grab her coat, straighten her hair, put on her shoes. Just get her out the door into the car. And then there's action for the sake of action. We see that a lot in dialogue, where you have people doing something, but does it add to the story? Because if it's not adding to the story, it's causing people to skim. It's causing them to skip chapters. It's dragging. So if the action is not adding something to the story, it can be cut. So that's my last slide for you. I know that's fast. That is a lot of information. But if you want to go more in depth, this was a quick overview of my book. If you want to go more in depth about how to really strengthen your self-editing, you're going to get a lot more in that book. But those are the ways to use your beta readers to your fullest potential and get the most out of your self-edits. And I think that's it. I just got to
Great
open my...
job. Anybody have questions? Y'all feel free to come on screen and ask questions.
Yeah, so there were a
Comments?
few questions. One of them is, I was told you have to start with a hook on the first page, and most just eliminate their first chapter in editing. Is this true? And how do you add normal while doing this?
You want to start, yes, there needs to be some type of hook. It's debatable as to whether or not it needs to be the first line, first paragraph, but there needs to be something that grabs the reader's attention. Like I said, establishing normal, it can be something as simple as in the Gilmore Girls. If you were to take that scene and write it out, it would look like, Lorelai, you would just have her begging Luke, please, can I, please, please, please. And he says, no, no, no. How many cups have you had? None. How many cups have you had? One. How many cups have you had? 4. You're automatically invested. What are they arguing about? And then you find out she's a coffee addict. Well, you've established normal. You see their banter. You are hooked in because you want to know what they're talking about. And this is why that first hook, I hesitate on that because one of the books that I read that I loved the hook was there was a boy in her room. That immediately had my attention. And I've had people tell me that's a terrible first line. It captured my attention because there was a boy in her room. I'm like, what room are we talking about and who is this boy? I wanted to know. So it just depends on, what you're writing, who's reading it. But yes, you want to do something to grab people's attention. And right away, I knew there was a boy in her room. The way she said that boy was not supposed to be there. You could tell by the tone. So there's been a normal established without paragraphs of explanation. Was there another part to the question that I missed? I think, oh. There we go. Any other questions?
Brandy? Brandy, you're muted.
Thank you. Is it good to eliminate boring characters? If you have more than one character and some of them are boring, what should a character do with them?
It depends on if they're necessary. If the character is necessary, then you need to figure out a way to make them engaging. But if it's a minor character that's boring, oftentimes you can combine that character with another one. So if this is a minor character, but you need, her there because your main character needs a sibling, but you've already written two siblings, then maybe just get rid of the girl and keep the brother and, combine them together. So you definitely don't want boring characters. If they're not serving a purpose, absolutely eliminate them. If they're needed, then you have to fix them. But if you can combine them with someone else, do that.
Great answer. And there is, I answered this a little bit in the chat, but I think you might have a different take on it. How do you distinguish between done before and expected tropes in genres?
Fantastic. Okay. Tropes are expected. People love tropes. You tell me that you have a marriage of convenience, grumpy sunshine, I'm there 100% of the time. Those are my favorite tropes. What makes it different is your voice, your character's voice, and the situations you put them in. So that was one of the things about, if you've ever seen the movie 50 First Dates, is that story was actually originally set, I think, like in Kansas or Oklahoma. And to make it a little bit different, they put the movie in Hawaii. Well, if you take a story that's already been done, but you really like, aspects of the Grumpy Sunshine and you like aspects of the Marriage of Convenience, first change the setting. It could be something different from the summer to winter. That's going to cause different conflict. That's going to cause different situations. Where done before happens is when the Grumpy Sunshine interact the same way all the time. When they're saying the same things all the time. When he is always the one rescuing her. Or if she is always the one rescuing him. That's not real life. So it's those little things are what add the flavor to it, but really it's finding your voice as well. Because if I gave every writer here the same writing prompt and said, write a 1,000-word story, we would all come up with something different. Our voices would all be different. And that's why it's important to focus, to really know how you tell a story, and your perspective that you put into your books is what's going to make it unique.
Excellent.
This has been so good. Excuse me, I've had a tickle all morning. So good and so informative in a way that I know you felt like it was a lot of information, but you gave it to us in such a way it was easy to receive it.
Good.
It wasn't sensory overload. But
It's
great, thank you.
another encouragement that I have for people as well, which is what I've started to do. Take some editing classes with a friend. Learn how to, and I teach editing classes. So if you want, I can teach you how to do it. But there's organizations that will teach you how to edit fiction. Get a friend, learn how to edit together, and then instead of hiring an editor, you can swap stories. And because you become a better writer the more you edit, because then you can start to see those things in your own works. So if you're having a hard time with beta readers, if you got a really good friend, learn how to do it together.
Great advice.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We can invite everybody else back on while we close up. So we're going to have everybody stick around here for a little bit for the after party in case there's a little bit more questions here or there. We will do them off the recording. Another reason for you to be here live if you want to join that Facebook group, Writers Chat members, so you can be here live. Norma, do you have what is next week that we can share with everybody?
Yes, next week our special guest is Martin Johnson. He had a horrific wreck in his 20s and has struggled with a traumatic brain injury since then, and he is an author. And he's going to come on and talk to us about what it's like writing with a disability. So knowing Martin as I do, I'm sure he will have some information, whether you have a disability or not. He has good tips for writing and keeping a balanced life. So I hope you'll come back and join us again, 11 a.m. Eastern, to join us live. And feel free to go around the globe and find your time zone and join us again on next Tuesday, 11 a.m. Eastern. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you all next week. Bye now.